My name is Chris May. I am the open source solutions advocate at Sangoma. Pleased to present the webinar today on Sizzling FreePBX 17. Hope your summer is going well. This will be covering some advanced FreePBX 17 installation options on Debian 12. Bit of an agenda. We'll have the introduction, talk about some different planning and good idea to plan before you install a system. And then we'll go through various different installation types. We'll look at a couple of different virtualization options, as well as some shared cloud, and then open it up to Q&A. But do feel free to raise your hand and ask questions in the chat as we move along. Now let's meet the team.
Hi there, Mike White, just here today to help Chris out. I'll be the guy driving the slides and I'll chime in, but like Chris said, feel free to ask a question whenever you have one. We're here to help you out. This is going to be, sort of an informal and fun look at what we're doing over here. So we hope it's as engaging as possible for you. Feel free to jump in.
Also on board with us today is Sheila Mancebo. She's the inside sales manager for the Caribbean and Latin America region. She'll be helping coordinate some of our Q&A. So please, again, do reach out because you are a part of this conversation. On to our next slide. That's the team. Look at some of the software mascots, also members of the team. First up, Tango, the FreePBX mascot. I can't tell who's better dressed today in the suit, Mike. Myself or Tango?
I think it's you. Tango looks pretty good, but
very good, very good. Great. Thanks. And that now Tango. Tango, of course, FreePBX running on what we call a Lampa stack. So that is Linux. There's Tux, the Linux mascot. Feather Apache logo is in a bit of a flux, but that's what it had been for a number of years. So that's the LA. And then MariaDB, of course, is a fork of MySQL, which we do use. And there's a C line. I guess the founder is fond of C lines. So that's the M in LAMP. And the PHP Elephant is their mascot. So primarily, this is a web-based GUI interface that stores information through the web server into a database and then is used to write asterisk configuration files with PHP as a lot of the coding and scripting. And of course, the A in the Lampa stack is Kit, the asterisk mascot. Now, Kit is short because for asterisk being a toolkit for telephony. So that's where the name and logo for Kit come from. The same person designed both of those logos, Tango and Kit. And add another logo in here because we do a lot with JavaScript, of course, as well. So there is a small logo from the turtle, the Node.js mascot, about to appear in the upper right corner. Kind of a fun one there. So those are some of the software mascots. Again, no affiliation with those projects in the smaller circles, but Tango, the official FreePBX mascot, Tango the tree frog, and Kit, the official asterisk mascot, are Sangoma intellectual property. So next slide, please, Mike. Talk about a couple of the operating systems we're going to review today. Of course, many of you are familiar with CentOS. It was the platform for a number of years for the FreePBX distribution. FreePBX 16 was built on CentOS 7. That went end of life last summer in 2024. So the project switched to Debian as the base. So we are now providing a FreePBX 17 distribution based on Debian 12. We have full version history calendaring for the next several years. What we project, just to talk about that for a minute, we anticipate FreePBX 17 will be and continue to remain on Debian 12. And when we release FreePBX 18 in beta, hopefully by next fall, that will be based on Debian 13, was just released a few days ago. It's a lot of different libraries, PHP version upgrades. So we want to make sure that we take a set amount of time to review those changes and to incorporate those for our next FreePBX 18. But we are going to be tying tightly the FreePBX versions to the Debian versions and also offering inline upgrades from one Debian version to the next. And so our goal is that when you do want to update from FreePBX 17 on Debian 12, to FreePBX 18 on Debian 13 that you'll be able to do that with taking sufficient backups, of course, but do that on your existing operating system instead of doing a full on your existing system instead of doing a full reinstall of the operating system, as was the case from FreePBX 16 to 17. Of course, there's a lot of great backup and restore tools in FreePBX to help with that process. Encourage you to use those and take backups. But just a cautionary note that there are some issues with running on Debian 13, and so you want to be careful not to go ahead and force an upgrade and just press the enter key or press yes every time that you run an update. And we are providing some updates to make sure that your system stays on Debian 12, which is supported for a number of years, and Debian has moved now to extended long-term support cycles, so we anticipate many, many years, and that's fully available. We published a FreePBX versions calendar in February on our wiki, so there is some forum threads on that, and there's also links on the wiki if you just look for FreePBX version calendaring. Now, a couple of logos you may not be as familiar with down near the bottom. The Cubes logo, we'll be talking about that's a GUI for Zen, the Zen hypervisor. We'll be talking about that for some of the virtualization slides, as well as Proxmox, which is a Debian-based distribution that focuses on virtualization as well as a management interface, and we'll talk more about that in some of the virtualization slides. So that is a look at the team, the humans, the mascots as well. Next slide, please, Mike. All right, let's first talk about planning. Mike and I are going to talk about these next couple of slides a little bit. Very important to plan for before you install. Well, what's the plan? Of course, you can just install for testing purposes as you like. But if you are looking, I just want to include a few slides on this topic about planning your installation. And we get a lot of common questions about what's the size going to be. How many calls can I handle? There's a number of different open source scripts available that do load testing and can figure out how many calls actually your machine can handle. But these specs here are for our FreePBX appliances. Of course, Sangoma, we offer solutions for a number of different spaces. These particular products are our FreePBX appliances. These are the 40 and 60. I have here is a 40 unit. It's a little NUC with a bunch of NICs on the back, a serial port on the front, some USB ports. We'll talk more about the serial port in a little bit. And that's the FreePBX 40 with the 40 user capacity, 30 call capacity, quad-core CPU. So these are just some general sizing guidelines. And then all the way up to FreePBX 1200. Now that's a 1U pizza box, little half a pizza box, small pizza, if you like, to rack mount device. And we can of course scale larger than that, but these are our physical boxes that we currently offer that seem to meet the use case for most of our scenarios. We have a lot of customers and clients in education and hospitality spaces that need something on-prem because they need to be able to call from one room to another, down the hall, the other building, not boomerang out to the internet. So Sangoma, of course, is one of the fewer companies offering both, like all three, a trifecta really of cloud, hybrid, and on-prem solutions. So we'll talk a little bit more about those, and maybe Mike can chime in here on the next slide in regards to some of our scope of our installations. So
Sure.
Mike, yeah, if you could
jump in. So I think one of the ways that I always like to look at it is really deployment agnostic. FreePBX finds itself at home in, as Chris mentioned, our appliances, but you'll find it quite regularly deployed in any of our partners like freepbxhosting.com. I see Nate's on here. We have our own hosting platform for our commercial version, which is called PBExact Cloud. And we offer a software-only version of PBExact as well as you know, FreePBX, and you can deploy it in your own public cloud or places like Vultr or just about anywhere you like.
Great, thanks, Mike. And I had just a little comment there. You may see in quotes and italics the TDM break for safety. That's an idea that so many systems now are moving towards SIP trunks and whatnot. But for more secure environments or if you'd like a little bit more isolation with your SIP infrastructure, to get something provisioned from the telco directly to your location for an on-prem solution, whether it be over fiber, cable, what have you, but then delivered to you as a T1 cable instead of direct IP connection. We do offer a number of hardware interface cards from Sangoma, has for many, many years, the best in the business when it comes to hardware telephony interface cards, to bring your T1 into your PBX so that you have a clean break then with separate switches, separate IP network for your phones, could be VLAN, could be completely separate physical ports. And now you've isolated it and made sure that that system is separated out from the internet. There's really nothing there other than perhaps intermittent connectivity needed for upgrades and whatnot. And then a bit on the hybrid note on the bottom, you can see the logo there on the right. That's for the advanced recovery commercial module, which is a FreePBX module available for that, and also PBExact, where you can put one system on-prem, you can put another system in the cloud, and then with this module, create a hybrid system in case one fails. You're going to have a synchronization, your configurations, and a seamless transfer of registrations, proper configuration between one and the other. So if you lose internet for some reason, you could do it between two cloud systems. You could do it between two on-prems. There's a lot of variety there in that hybrid model. So that's some of that idea that, just as part of your planning process, what you can do. And, you can start small, on-prem, or start small in cloud, and then bridge the gap between when you want lower latency and things like that. Speaking of which, on the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about some of the network planning issues. So I put this here together. It's more like an online gaming network, right? You really want to focus on low latency and reduce packet loss. So our regular, the PSTN previously, pretty great quality when it comes to, well, if you don't mind 8 kilohertz windows, and that's a whole nother conversation about the range. But as far as compared to something like 729, it's a world a lot better. So when you look at codecs and running these things over VoIP connections where you have a poor internet connectivity, you start getting latency, you start running into a lot of problems that are noticeable to users and are problematic. So you definitely want to plan out your network well. This is a little bit different than your typical data network where nobody minds if there's a couple seconds lag on sending an email, or that real-time communication. You need to be more concerned with that. So and then also something to be very conscious of if this is kind of your first foray into it. I know this is an advanced conversation, but SIP and NAT, like oil and water, right? There's a lot of ports you need open for proper RTP media flows. And it's a good thing to have a lot of these open so you don't run into situations where you're getting flooded with packets on ports that are being used for voice, and you get an interruption and denial of service attack. So there are, but then that also raises challenges about how to forward those ports. And so your routers, a big thing that we see a lot is, drop calls after 30 seconds. We see, one or no way audio. We see SIP ALG being very problematic in these situations. And so there are just a couple ideas and a couple things to consider about your networking equipment, all the way, your entire network. It's a great way to stress test your network deploying VoIP. So that's a bit about the planning part of it. Now I think we'll go into a little bit more on the installation and get into the nitty gritty here. So, all right. First, the Sangoma script. Of course, it's going to run on Debian 12, so you're going to want to prepare your operating system. 13, not going to work. Ubuntu is not going to work. We've got a step-by-step guide, though, to setting up Debian if this is your first time. You can scan that QR code on your phone and follow along onto our wiki. It goes through a QEMU virtualized setup, the GUI interface. Now, a couple points to talk about here. I think important is the all-in-one partition. This is not necessarily a pet peeve, but we see a lot of disks getting filled up. A lot of people are recording their phone calls. They're running the scribe module for FreePBX, for example, which is doing transcriptions of both your voicemails and, if you'd like, monitored call audio. So in call center environments, it can provide you an entire log of a transcript of the call, as well as a summary and a sentiment analysis, and trigger on keywords to send you emails in case there's a problem. So a lot more people are enabling call recording as we move into this, AI space. And try not to say AI again for the rest of my presentation. But when you do this, you're running a system, you're going to start needing more storage, right? We're regularly rotating these files. We do offer the ability to keep the transcript separately from the recordings, but if you have everything in one partition and you're not careful about it, you're not following the warnings and not having alerts sent, and it runs away on you, you're going to fill up the drive, and that's going to crash the system, right? So you're going to run into all sorts of problems then. If you have separate partitions, however, and you have separate var, spool, asterisk in particular, a lot of that data is going to be isolated from your binaries and important logs that you might need to review the system later. This is a significant advantage to have separate partitions, also because you can makes it much easier for a reinstallation later and moving things around. Like if you have everything in one giant partition and it's 2 terabytes, that's, you've got a lot of space. Okay, you're probably not going to run out of room for the calls. You think you're in the clear. The problem arises if you need to run it, like if an FSIC needs to run in that drive, or there's some other issue at some point in the file system, now your entire thing could potentially be corrupted. I mean, file systems are improving a lot over the years, but this is why, in particular, our distro takes an approach that isolates things into separate partitions. And so, we've got just a lot of, focus on that. When you are installing Debian, you can just hit enter, and the how-to guide will show you just to blast through and put it all in one partition. But for more advanced users, strongly encourage you to at least break out var, right? Try to get all the way down to breaking out var, spool, asterisk if you can. That's because that's going to have most of your write activity. Now, another couple of points. In the installation, by default, when you install Debian, the GUI options are going to be selected at the very top of the list. Okay, yes, FreePBX is a GUI for Asterisk, right? But it's not a desktop environment. It's through a web browser that you're accessing the GUI functionality. So you don't need any of that. That's just a lot of extra bloat in libraries. The 2 most important things are to make sure that SSH server is checked and standard system utilities are checked. And the rest of the packages, when you run the script, are going to be installed by the FreePBX 17 shell script. And another little tip here, part of the advanced, setup guide, if you are running on some sort of exotic new hardware, or you've got some other issues that you need to address during installation, you can hop out of the standard Debian install as well as our FreePBX ISO by hitting Control F2. Sets you into another terminal window where you can have a BusyBox shell that you can run some commands, look at the target, see what's happening, and examine dmessage output, and then be sure to hit Control F1 to jump back. Next slide, please, Mike. That's a bit on the operating system. Now, our Sangoma script, I just want to talk about a couple of runtime options there. So the script itself, it's a shell script, the basic default. I included here a little bit of an extra step you can see to review the shell script with the less command. A lot of our guides showed it to download wget and then run it immediately as root. That's fine. I mean, we're a trusted source for providing this information, but it's some consider it a bad habit to download random shell scripts from the internet and run them as root on your machine. So a little inspection doesn't hurt. Maybe it's just, to get in that good habit as, a more advanced administrator, and to review what's happening in the script, and just to take a look at some of the different options. You'll see there's a number in there for installing without asterisk, installing without FreePBX, which is kind of weird, to think about in our installer, installing with Dotty, is what I highlighted in number 2. So if you do have one of those interface cards that I mentioned, those physical cards, then you're going to want to make sure that you include the Dotty drivers with it. And this is also going to trigger some locking to the kernel version. So Debian, as a rolling distribution, it's constantly, seeing, tested, stable updates to the latest, to newer Linux kernels, I should say. But we then go through and take those kernels and test them with our hardware. And so we lock the kernel versions until we're confirmed through QA processes that things are working as expected. Now, generally, without major kernel updates, in just the minor versions, we're pretty good, and Debian is pretty good about staying on that same mainline, kernel branch. Helps probably drive some of the upstream, Linux development. But anyhow, it's just important that if you want to run the hardware, that we keep on that. And then there's a couple options I include in the bottom too. If you are, we had some community input and patching for an open source only option, and also to remove a codec that is from the system. So you can then by these options in number 3, there's currently a little bit of a hiccup. There are sometimes does install a couple commercial non-free things and then tries to remove them. So this is just an option that is available to you as well. And there are several more you can pick Node.js versions and other things. So, and we're working on expressing a few more of those when it comes to even like allowing you to choose the asterisk version instead of modifying the shell script file, but you could go ahead and pick it at that time. So anyhow, looking at the script before you run it as root is super cool. So get your shades out for that one. On this Sizzling FreePBX 17 webinar. Next slide. Thank you, Mike. This is a bit more about the ISO and how we built it. There is a GPL'd Ansible role. It started out as a shell script, got a little too big, got pulled in a few different directions, was easier to distribute the work by converting it into a Ansible role. This is in kind of an interesting, perhaps you find it interesting, but a little different way to think about it is that we're running Ansible on local host. So that subject of my talk, I have a next month in Denver. It's part of the DevOps Summit. But I think this idea of now there's still several shell scripts involved in this Ansible role, but the idea of moving more shell scripts into Ansibleized versions that have a little bit more structure to them, and that we're not repeating some of these same patterns. Like I want to add a function to do logging. Okay, well, Ansible provides, a lot of just debug outlaying. I get logging, I get timing, I get distribution. If I want to, I get a lot of other advantages that I can help wrap it around. I get YAML, I get JSON. I get real well formatted structure to it, right? So typically we use Ansible for orchestration and remote administration, but you can run it on localhost as well. So the details are provided in the FreePBX GitHub in the SNG FD12 repo. You can download and take a look at what this is doing. But it also allows iterative development, and when something breaks, you can go to exactly that point in the Ansible role and pause and take a look at things. So just a summary of what's happening here. The 3-step summary is that we start with a standard Debian 12 ISO, and we download it. You can do this as well with the script, and rip it open with Xorizo, pull out a few interesting bits, modify those, do a lot of what Debian calls pre-seeding, which if you're from the CentOS Red Hat world, you may have heard of Kickstarter. So it's a similar idea. What now, things have kind of moved to cloud init if you're in the cloud, but it seems like some of that's coming back. Anyhow, this, the 3-step version, we use Xorizo, rip open that ISO, add a bunch of stuff, remove some things we don't need, and then zip it back up with the pre-seed and pretty wallpaper inside into our FreePBX ISO output. And that is a reproducible process now. There's nothing dynamic happening, such as like a date stamp or whatnot. So when you do get that output ISO, if you're running the same version of the SNG FD12 Ansible role, you'd be able to produce the same bit-for-bit copy based on the same Debian input ISO. So that's something important we considered for allowing for people to do this themselves. And we released this as a GPL. So of course, there's 1,001 ways to install Debian, and we're always working to improve. But this is our approach based on stock vanilla Debian ISO. So that is what you download when you do download our ISO. And then on to the next slide, please, Mike. Talk a little bit about the idea of the ISO is as a wrapper really for the shell installer. So this is a part of the first boot script that boots up when you do run the ISO. There's the initial installation screen, but again, this is just really the ISO is a vehicle to get you to run that shell installer. System reboots a couple of times, and then you're up and running as if you run the shell installer, install Debian yourself, right? There's a few different spice levels that we've kind of adopted this nomenclature for to discuss how we're expressing like the different options available to you during the installation. So a pub version, a fog version, those are in the basic category. Pub is probably where you're going to want to start. Break it down there. If you do have dotty hardware, pub, upgrade, or int are what you're going to focus on. We wrote all this ISO in order to make it easier to install things, to install those appliances, like this guy, as I showed earlier, in our factory warehouse environments, right? So it's a little bit, a few steps that are involved, right? To install Debian, to go through, set up users, passwords, all these things. We automate a lot of that through pre-seeding, but we wanted to drive it even further down. And so sort of a side benefit for the community, it's the primary focus, like we're going to get these boxes out, right? Ship running the software as quickly as we can. So with 3 keystrokes, if you want to run that in advanced installation for the internal spice int on our new appliances, you're off to the races. Like it's an A, it's an I, and it's an enter key, right? Especially if you're doing it UEFI. This shows the BIOS menu right here, but the UEFI is actually a little quicker. And then it's going to start up as long as you have DHCP connected. It's going to download the script's going to run. It's going to install itself. It's going to reboot, and it's going to keep going. If there's an issue, if there's some networking problem, something else isn't right, it'll just keep repeating that process. So that's a little bit more details on the ISO as a wrapper for the shell installer. Now we'll move on to a couple different areas here in the installation. Can move on to the excuse me, sorry, one more slide on the boot menu. So again, just a bit of a cautionary note here, and some of the more basic understanding, I guess, is that we are wiping your disks. So when we're installing the system, this is destroying anything in your existing system. Be careful. Please do not leave a large USB drive attached. As anything over about 100 gigs or so will be detected as a disk drive and will blow it away. And if you had one SSD of a terabyte in your system and you had a 200 gig or 256 gig USB stick, now you're going to have a RAID 1 when you're done. So on those 2 devices. And your ISO installation medium will have been overwritten. So be careful with that. Try to have some, we definitely have some warnings in yellow. They're not shown on the screen, but what I did show here is if you do hit the tab key in the BIOS installer or the E key to edit the menu, you can go in and control in a little bit more detail the different options. We're doing a lot of overloading of the kernel command line here, and then parsing those out through during our pre-seed early and late boot commands. So if you look closely though, at the bottom there it says console TTY-S0, and it shows a bit rate and some other parameters. That's what you see if you highlight the serial line and hit the tab key in the BIOS. Again, though, UEFI is encouraged, especially if you're doing RAID 1, it's required. The way that we have the synchronization of the EFI partition set up in the FreePBX 17 ISO it very much depends on a RAID 1 setup. So you can do something like power off the machine, disconnect one drive, and boot off the other drive successfully. And then when you replug the primary drive back in, you need to run a couple of commands, but that failover physical unplugging of one drive to boot off the other only works with UEFI. So onto the serial slides on the next slide here. Again, focused on that line at the bottom. You can see here the serial port. So we'll talk about that a bit. Some more advanced options. This is how we do things at the warehouse in the factory. This port here, there it is. That is something we connect well, everybody's got a little different cable for this kind of thing, right? So I just use an RJ45 for testing purposes. It's a flat serial crossover cable, so I connect that now, not in Ethernet ports; those are on the back, the 4 of them on this device, but into the serial console. And your hardware may have a 9-pin, but um, and I do, because on the other end of that cable, I do have this adapter to a 9-pin, if you can see that okay. Yep. And that's the RJ 45 adapter. So this is a little older school setup, I guess, but they have all these in one, fancier cable now. And then the serial to USB adapter. I think I saw these on Amazon for like $1, but so just to, and then I'm plugging this USB port into my PC, into my Linux, my Debian desktop, in order to connect over Minicom. So you can do that from Windows machine too, probably connect over hyperterminal, whatnot. I'm not sure the exact app on Windows. And then when you do install, though, you're going to want to pick the serial option. So we offer the rescue mode. These are the standard Debian rescue modes that are presented here in the screen. Again, this is a modified version of the Debian installer. So, but you can do a rescue or serial. So this is what it looks like. You can see on the screen in my terminal window, and I believe this is through the UEFI actually. Boot method, and you may have to adjust some things in your BIOS to do this. Sometimes the serial output or serial port needs to be enabled, depending on what your hardware is like. But our hardware, Sangoma hardware solutions, are pretty robust. The BIOS is really flexible, allows a lot of configuration and adjustment. So I really like it. It's one of the most probably the most robust BIOS that I've seen. And everything is available to you to do those kinds of advanced things. Now, one caveat though, sometimes serial port does get a little sticky, so you might have to plug it out, plug it back in. And if you really just see a dark screen, then and no output, then it probably means you didn't pick serial. So Mike, if you could click here for a second, I just focus on that one and this superfluous animation coming up here in just a second. There it is, serial port. If you use the serial installation, please do pick the serial port. All right, next slide, please, Mike. That's it on the serial port. PXE network booting. So we not only do these at the factory warehouse over the serial port, but we do it over a PXE boot server. So the Ansible role is modified a little bit, built, I guess I should say, to handle this specifically, and there's some sort of separate extraction steps that we had in place, but it'll actually now take the mini networking images from the Debian ISO and spit those out. So there's kind of an example there of how that works in the command line. Now, a build FPX installer ISO is a shell script convenience wrapper around the Ansible role. Like so actually, I mean, you run the Ansible role, you don't even necessarily know it because you're running the shell script, right? As long as you've installed the prerequisite Ansible, then you can go ahead and use it. And instead of just a normal -i for the input ISO, you would just supply a P. We also have a B option to specify the year and the month, and then a minor build version that defaults to, for example, it'd be 2508.1 if you ran it right now with no B, but you could spec that to be it's not shown here, but 25082 if you wanted to, if we came out with another version this month. So we should have another one out very, very soon, definitely this month. So this note here is on the PXE network booting. If you haven't done that before, the pre-execution environment is designed to boot devices over the network, and so you can actually set up your DHCP server to hand out the IP address as a special option in the lease of your PXE boot server. On smaller networks, I run OpenWRT a lot, and just bake it right into my DHCP leases there. When I am running it, I'm not always running my PXE boot server, but you can set up dedicated servers as well if you're doing a bunch of these systems. So you may even have seen this in some cloud providers will provide PXE boot options as part of their installations, but we'll get to more cloud stuff in a few minutes. So Again, recommending the UEFI solution, which is sort of an odd one from a security perspective, right? It's like, how do we know this environment is, secured? I mean, we're booting over a network, so, hopefully your LAN's safe. But you can do it, and it's an available option in the Sangoma appliances, and our new hardware, it started coming out this year. I believe it was also on the previous version, but the new stuff definitely has this ability, and so that's how we're utilizing and shipping out, for example, that 1200 appliance that has a dual RAID setup. So that is a bit of the talk on Pixie network booting. I do see a couple of questions, and I know I condensed a lot in those two slides. So before we get onto the virtualization, if we could maybe take a look and see what those questions look like. Are you able to
I can't
see
see
some?
that. It looks like we had one
Okay.
question about having this presentation of the webinar in electronic form. This will be posted to our YouTube channel. You'll probably see a blog post about it. Definitely going to share this information afterward.
Yep. Yeah, we do post these, on the YouTube. And we also have a comment on AMD CPUs. You certainly should be able to run that on your own hardware. An AMD modern AMD CPU. Um, I do personally, but our appliances are Intel. I'll say this as a comment on clock cycles. Very important, asterisk, to handle more calls and things. Multiple cores, fast CPU, to keep those VoIP packets moving along. Very important. So I would recommend pay attention to that in your CPU selection. But yeah, it's we're running on x86 64. It's all 64-bit AMD based now. So either Intel or AMD. We're not supporting ARM or whatnot. So I see another question about the 100 gigabyte drives. If you're the question is on slide 15, you mentioned that any USB drive over 100 gigabyte will be wiped during the ISO install. If your ISO boot USB drive is over 100 gigabyte, will it be wiped also? Brian, the answer is yes, it will be at this point in time. We've had some requests for a little bit more leniency when it comes to drive partitioning and allocation. Again, if you consider our factory warehouse environment and those appliances I showed earlier, we have fixed hardware sizes. We have known hard drive sizes that we are dealing with, and so we've definitely leaned towards utilizing some very static parameters, and they're flexible, right? I mean, they'll adapt to different drive sizes, but we kind of know where our targets are and what size and spacing allocations we want. So that's a choice we made, and we probably won't see this as something that happens in the internal SPICE, or possibly not even the upgrade SPICE, but maybe on the pub, for the public, we do go ahead and offer a little bit more flexibility there and a little bit more caution, and try not to. But you can imagine, it is just a little bit of an order of operations thing and what time devices become available and how we detect them. And so we just decided that since we're Pixie booting over the network, and that was the initial thought, right? Like we don't, via serial port, right? We don't even have a USB drive plugged in. So the USB was kind of to get it onto an ISO is sort of a secondary thought. So there may be, another thought occurred to me recently, and I haven't seen this in a while on thumb drives. Here's my thumb. But there in the past, I've seen drives that have had a read write switch enabled. So if that's something that you have on maybe spend a couple extra bucks and find that online, I'd be happy to look into that a little bit more, because that would be another way to prevent this, right? Like if you lock that in at the physical device layer, then you should be all right there. So, okay, that's it for questions. So, all right, let's move on to, I see one more. Ubuntu, question about Ubuntu. Is Debian based? Does the install script work on that also, or do you manually install? I don't know. We don't support it. Ubuntu is generally based on like the Debian unstable branch, and so you run a bunch of other issues there. Of course, there's a lot of good feedback and cross pollination, a lot of good ideas going from Debian and Ubuntu and back and forth. And so I have not run it. I don't believe it will though, because we are locked into some different versions than what's available on standard Ubuntu. So now I see a question about virtualization, which and Proxmox specifically. So let's just go through a couple of those slides, and then maybe that might help answer your question here in just a minute. So you see here local virtualization. I'm a big fan of Cubes. It's a GUI for the Zen hypervisor. Came out about 10, 12 years ago. It's primarily on a Fedora base OS, and it's a Zen hypervisor, right? So it's really a GUI for that, and it provides isolation in your DOM 0 so that you're not directly connecting to the network. Like contrast that with something like Proxmox, which you're logging in as root over the web server, when you first interact with it. So Cubes is more focused on a desktop experience. Like there's been a lot of work in there to try to get Windows VMs. I don't do that myself personally, but there are a number of tools available to make copying and pasting things between VMs easy. There's concepts of disposable virtual machines. So if you want to open up a potentially unsafe file or document, you can do that and then let that VM just disappear when you're done. There's a templating system. So you have these Debian or Fedora. Those are the core templates now supported in the latest versions of Cubes. And then you layer on your applications. And so if you do install something in an application VM, so you visit a nasty website, it tries to write to your file system, even if it looks like it's successful writing to /user, for example, in your application VM. That's actually just a read-only layer on top of it doesn't affect the template VM underneath. So you can independently update the template VM, and you could switch templates. So if for example, I'd switch from Debian 11 to 12, I'll probably go to a 13 template soon. And I kept my application VM the same. And so I was able to, keep all my bookmarks or whatnot. And just enjoy like the new browser and new tools in the new template VM with very few changes needed. So you can kind of mix and match like this. This is one way I like for, it's not as popular maybe, but for rapid iterative virtual machine development, which they call these cubes in the Cubes operating system, because they've added so many things to it, right? All this GUI layer. So this is what it looks like after you'd set up a new virtual machine. I like 2 gigs of RAM for these and 2 CPUs for FreePBX 70 installations. I think that's a pretty fair minimum. And then you click on that button that's highlighted, circled in pink there, to boot the Cube from a disk or block device. The label has changed a little bit in recent versions of Cubes, but the idea there is that you can then, if you flip to the next slide, Mike. Thank you. You can pick then, I put all my ISOs in one virtual machine. I mean, I try to. And then I can copy them. I download them from one machine or on one virtual machine. And then I copy them over to this ISO machine, which is disconnected from the network. So I don't have to keep comparing hashes all the time, right? It's isolated. There's no network device attached directly to it because of the way that Cubes isolates network components and other hardware. I mean, you can assign PCI interrupts to separate devices so your mouse can stay within a VM and cool things like that. Anyhow, the point here is that you pick this ISO from the dropdown and can go through and install it, and then that's what the installation screen. You see that installation screen that I showed in that window a bunch of times. Now talking about Proxmox virtualization here. So this is pretty popular with a number of engineers and internally, a lot of development work. Proxmox separate entity producing this Debian derivative. Installs pretty quick. I've got it actually running on one of our little appliances for testing. I have multiple appliances here. So when I set this one up though with a FreePBX 17 install, it's nice because the network is a little bit easier. Cubes, the networking is a little bit more isolated. So, but to actually run a full server in your own setup, if you have a Proxmox server, and they have a subscription, I believe, and licensing, it's a whole separate area, not affiliated with them, but you can go ahead and enjoy commercial support for these environments. And you might have some systems running FreePBX 16, for example, in a Proxmox VM, and some running on FreePBX 17. Maybe you're trying it out, or you're running some other separate server for internal web pages and whatnot. It is, of course, there are considerations, anytime you're virtualizing, like sharing CPU and whatnot. But to answer Giancarlo, your question about FreePBX performing better on Proxmox compared to other hypervisors, I am not able to fairly say that because I have not tested on the same hardware Proxmox versus others. It's good enough on our FreePBX 40 appliance for my limited testing purposes. But I am running Core i7 on my laptop, and so when I'm doing things in cubes, it's a little bit quicker. So I can't really say. It does seem like the tools are quite mature, and I mean, right out of the box, if you haven't installed Proxmox before, it's a treat. Again, make sure it's a new setup, a new hardware setup. Because you're going to blow away the disks, obviously, but it does seem to just work, right? And open source software, download the ISO, and boom, I was up and running. So if you can go to the next slide, Mike, so I've got one more Proxmox slide. I know there's some community activity around some of these Proxmox scripts. One caveat, in some of our installs, like on cubes, I can get away with 30 gigs for our minimum size installation with FreePBX 17. On Proxmox, I can't do that. For whatever reason, I pick 40. I don't know if it's big B, little b type of conflict or what, but I did have to pick a little bit larger disk. And so those are just the specs I installed with before I hit confirm. And then if you don't, start after connect, or if you have run into an issue for some reason, like I ran into an issue at 32 gigs, this is what I thought I was going to confirm, and I had to go back in and then resize. You can do that. You can dynamically, with just a couple of mouse clicks, expand that drive out to 40 gigs, and then rerun the installer. You just need to make sure you change the boot priority, because during this initial setup, it'll try to attach to that CD-ROM, but then you'll want to sit on your SCSI actually, for booting regularly. So you just have to, be mindful of the boot order in the Proxmox configuration if you've already installed. It's definitely geared towards like uploading the ISO, booting off that ISO the first time, and having it work. And if it doesn't, then you just have to take a couple extra steps. So I think we have a question on virtualization now. I saw from Chris, so maybe this is a good time to try to answer it. Checking to see if Azure or Hyper-V 2025 is supported for FreePBX 17. Was seeing if we set up a cluster, if that is supported for HA. Well, it's just one of those general. You can see the word backup in my is set to 0 here in my Proxmox setup on the right side of that pink circle. But yeah, virtualization. I mean, you get all these benefits like snapshots, and running another VM as the same IP potentially to come up on a whole nother physical hardware system and to migrate, and all these other advantages from virtualization. Of course, there's definitely conflict if you don't have enough CPU to do things, or if something else is trashing your CPU on that shared resource, right? And that's more of a concern in shared cloud, which we'll get into in a minute. But on your specific question on the Hyper-V setup, like even this Proxmox isn't officially supported, right? Like we are officially supporting those physical hardware appliances. And if you run, let me back that up and say that like if you are running it virtualized in these environments, it's not that we're not going to support you if there's a problem with the FreePBX modules. But if you're running into a problem with your virtualization setup because your NIC is flapping, you're dropping packets at that layer, and we determine it, like there's definitely going to be some time to reconsider that setup, and of course they're supportive ideas, and we're happy to take community contributed documentation and help incorporate that in the wiki and the forums to help other users with that. But as far as can you do it? I've heard reports of it. Yes. One of the ways that I've heard some success is to use the serial port. Now I tried the serial port on Proxmox to do the serial port installation, and it looks kind of clunky. I mean, it always looks a little clunky, right? It's a serial port. but it was doable. But when it was in the native GUI, the VGA default display or whatnot, it was much cleaner, shall we say. But for some virtualization environments, it may be easier to use the serial port instead of trying to do some sort of VNC to VGA connection, if depending on what's available in that hypervisor. So I know I've heard some reports of people having some success in these different virtualization areas with using the serial port instead. And so, of course, it's a server. Once it's up and running, you SSH into it. If you need to connect every now and then over a serial to get a login console, that's fine too. So, although VNC, maybe it was VNC like making some of the quirks on the serial port in particular in Proxmox, it didn't seem like I could get those settings quite right. So and then once you start scaling up to multiple devices, I mean, that's a whole nother ball of wax. So not gonna address I think as far up as you can scale. Other than to say that, like, in order to get that kind of scaling, you're talking dedicated CPUs and dedicated resources. So, all right, that's about it for those questions. On to a little bit more virtualization talk. Now, as far as our shared cloud, this is going to walk through in 5 steps here, just a bit of an example of what a Vultr setup. No affiliation again with Vultr, but this is a pretty popular shared cloud providing service. So if you do have some sort of need to spin up in a shared cloud environment, this is kind of just one way to do it. Now, I said earlier, it's a good idea to read the shell scripts if you just go randomly running things from the internet, but I've read the shell script. So you can see here in the script section of your orchestration, there's a few different ways to go. We're going to focus on that one. You can just take the curated Debian images. I mean, one of the design goals initially to move, and to put this on Debian 12, FreePBX 17, is it would be easy to go ahead and put it out there for everyone to run the shell script on whatever Debian installation they have in the cloud, on-prem or whatnot. Because a lot of these cloud providers offer like a local Debian package repository. They offer some cloud init integration to do things like set up your username and password, quickly your SSH keys. So you can take advantage of that with the native Debian, the modified, their local derivative of it, and then install our shell script on top. You can also run the FreePBX ISO. You can upload that. Vultr, I believe, was limiting to 2 ISOs, and I checked recently, and now it doesn't seem like there's a limit. So you could just specify the URL directly to the ISO on the freepbx.org website, and then pull it down into your Vultr environment, depending on where you put it and where you're installing. I mean, you download to Chicago and try to install in Dallas, it's going to take a minute, but that's exercise for you. Then this script, though, is sort of a Vultr specific thing. I think it's probably doing something with cloud init early on and looks at this script. So this sort of maybe a little too clever way to download the script and install it. But I would add for perfection, you probably want to isolate the exact version number of the script and then compare some sort of hash or something else. Script itself does some of that stuff. It checks its version, checks its hash when it's booting up to tell you if there's something different that you might need to download on the server, but this might be a concern. And then there's other options like, skip version check you can supply to the shell installer, and that will blast ahead with whatever version you specify here. So, all right, next slide, please, Mike. Looking at step 2 of what this setup in Vultr is going to look like as we transition the slides, fairly smoothly. It's when you do pick the Debian option, like in the top there in Vultr, then you just go down to pick the startup script. I'd recommend picking and setting up some SSH keys ahead of time, because it's nice to be able to log in your system. But once you have that script set up, you'll see that option as well. And of course, there's other choices there you can make in regards to firewall and IP address. It's nice to have static IPs if you want to register phones to it, but if it's all dynamic, then maybe you don't need to do that. If you're just doing a pure IVR registered to a SIP trunking provider, for example. Next slide, please, Mike. So the third step here, you can see when you are running with the script, it's not going to come up quite as quick, right? I mean, Debian's going to get installed. You'll see some it'll say installing there instead of running, and that's why the initial Vultr installation is happening of the OS. But then the script has to run, so do its installation. So we don't see that that is what is happening in that initial running state. So if you click on the ellipsis next to running, which is blocked, actually I see now by that pink circle on the upper right. But if you click on the ellipsis, it drops down a menu and you pick View Console. So, yep, there it is. Thanks, Mike. And next slide to step 4. And you can see here like a view from the VNC terminal. So this is pretty standard. If you install FreePBX 17, you can see the spinning. Now I'm connected. I clicked View Console. It connected. It showed me all this output. This is out without logging in yet, right? Like, I mean, I've just, Vultr has done it, your cloud hosting provider has done its basic installation. That little orange box is done. It says it's up and running, which is correct. And you could log in right now. The OS is up and running, but now it's executing and downloaded and executed. The shell script installer, which is running, takes another, maybe 20 minutes or so, right? Typically, a lot faster than some of these, cloud providers. I mean, I think I saw 250 megs per second downloaded all the updates for Debian and in a split second. So last slide on the shared cloud, please, Mike. Next, number 5. So once it's complete, this is kind of what your screen is going to look like. You'll see in pink, I forgot to include some SSH keys the first time I ran this, and then I destroyed the instance. Because I couldn't log in, and I tried some of the cloud init tools to set up just a plain text user pass, which seemed like it had been supported at one point and wasn't available for an existing user. So it's just a cheap test VM, so I destroyed it and set up my key, configured my key again. But that's what'll happen. So you have a little bit more headache if you install like this and you're on the system where now you can't log in. I mean, you can still go through in the BIOS and probably boot in a single user mode, mount things and do it that way. But definitely a few extra steps involved, and just turn it off and turn it back on again. So just a reminder to include your SSH keys, very helpful in cloud environments. That is it for the shared cloud portion. Now, if that's a bit much, I just wanted to focus on one of our last slides here to talk about a bit more about professional hosting. Of course, I talked a lot about problems with trade-offs in the shared cloud hosting space. CPU stealing is a big problem. Missing, interrupts, dropping packets, not being able to service those in a timely manner is very detrimental to VoIP. Codec translation can be very CPU intense. Doing something like Opus transcoding or WebRTC, number of different things that you can have your Asterisk, your FreePBX system do, put a load on that CPU. So if you're sharing it with others and they're running a CPU intense process, your call quality is going to suffer. So for hobbyists, like setting things up, trying things out, shared's way to go. But if you do want something a little bit more professional, I just listed a few options. The first one, the PBExec Cloud from Sangoma. Mike, I'm sure be happy to talk a lot more about that offline, and can offer online demos. I heard that Nate is on the call from freepbxhosting.com. Run a very close partnership with them in regards to making sure that FreePBX hosting is available. So that can be on your own or managed as well. So you talk to them. And then Tony Telly, I want to make mention. Kieran put out a lot of good open source scripts recently. I'm not sure if he's on, but in the UK.
Yes, Kieran is on the call as well.
Oh, fantastic. So, they have put together a lot of helpful things for load testing recently and making installations, easier. So I didn't focus on those scripts as much. I hadn't had as much opportunity to play with those, but they are, Sangoma provider who's offering, hosting as well. So I see we've just got a couple minutes left for questions. Happy to stay over for a bit. So I'm going to jump to Sean's question here. Are the commercial modules specific to Debian, or will they run on other distros? Commercial modules specific to Debian, or will they run on other distros? Well, that's a good question. Of course, we have still commercial modules on FreePBX 16. I know I focused a lot on FreePBX 17, but FreePBX 16 is still supported. Actually, FreePBX 15 is supported. Well, it's security fix only or commercial module upgrades until September of this year. So you've got less than just a few weeks left actually to move off 15. Good reminder about that. But 16 is CentOS based. 17 is Debian based. There are certainly lots of other distributions out there beyond those supported beyond those operating systems and those supported versions. I can't. I mean, they might run, but as far as support and if it's a commercial module that's using some sort of encrypted IonQ encoding, then that's probably not going to fly really well. So you're welcome to try it, I suppose, but like it's support's not going to be there, and I wouldn't recommend it for commercial modules in particular. So that hopefully answers your question there, Sean. I have another question here, which from, let's see, that was already a question asked. Nestor says a FreePBX installation with a lot of DIDs, a bunch of queues and agents and IVRs. He was looking at FreePBX 1200 and then has some specs here with 64 gigs of RAM and 48 CPUs. Wow, I would love to set up a VM on that environment. How many calls could I wait without affecting voice quality? I would recommend just taking a look at some of those load testing scripts that are out there. If you want some other open source options, and adapting those to your environment. The simplest is just to spool call files to asterisk, right? Well, that's not the simplest. I shouldn't use that word. It's simple if you know asterisk, right? I'm been a Digium certified asterisk professional for a few years now, so I sometimes I misuse that word simple when it comes to this stuff. But anyhow, I like to just try to load test with just spooling calls, but they're into the varspool asterisk outgoing directory. You write them into like a temp folder and then a temp directory, and then move them over there, and you can just set up a shell script to do that for you rapidly. And that's something that you could do maybe between two systems to see how it handles. There are other load testing scripts out there that can kind of push it to that limit, but if you are looking at those specs from our FreePBX 1200 appliance and you're definitely exceeding those and you're dedicating those resources to it and not allowing CPU sharing with other things or a bunch of other interrupts or doing some giant backup drive that's thrashing your disk in the middle, then I think you probably have enough to push a lot more calls. But that's not looking at your CPU necessarily either, and how those are working out. So I would say it'd be fun to test. Now,
Nestor,
yeah,
that's something
ahead,
also, Nestor, if you'd like to have an offline conversation about that, we can dig into that a little bit more closely and help you out with that as well. I'll drop you an email.
Cool. Thanks, Mike. Let's see. Who provides UCP? A question from Jared. The user control panel is part of the FreePBX modules. Yeah, so that would be something that you can download through normal FreePBX channels. Is there Dave, question about an ETA on when the ISO will be out of beta? I'm hoping soon. There is not at this point. I think once we get through a little bit more testing on 12.11, I anticipate that's what we're going to be on for it. So Jared's comment, no SIP ALG if you want it to work right. Agreed. It's possible, and just sometimes people are reluctant to, if you have a separate admin of your network firewall router appliance and they're hesitant to do it for some reason, there's other workarounds. You definitely need to, work tightly though and modify things. There are a lot of, I'll say in PJ SIP generally, which is the SIP stack now for Asterisk, there's a lot more opportunity to negotiate different IPs and ports, and different connection options. And so you can really push some of those, ALGs and deal with their packet mangling much better in the past. Costas has a question on reusing the same deployment ID in order to claim the commercial modules that we had. Mike, this is a good question for you. Can we reuse the same deployment ID in order to claim the commercial modules that we already have been purchased?
So yes, currently with FreePBX, we have, and the transition to 17, we give you 2 installs. Anything after that, you would have to reach out directly to support. You can also, hit myself up on forum or reach out to Tango at Sangoma.com, and someone from our team can look into that and give you some more installs on that if you have that requirement. I see there's also another sort of companion comment here that asks if commercial modules that were tested can be removed from the system. You can certainly remove the module. If you have a commercial license that you want to be removed, feel free to hit up that same Tango email address. Someone from my team or myself be more than happy to remove that license directly from the system for you.
Thanks, Mike. Well,
no problem.
That about wraps it up, I think. A few minutes over. Thanks again, everybody, for participating in the webinar today. If you, like Mike said, tango at sangoma.com is a great email address to reach out, ask more questions and follow up. Webinar should be up soon on YouTube. If you do have any further questions, we're happy to help there. We do offer training. Final blurb on that. We are offering some training this fall. So if you're interested in that, please do send us an email as well. We're going to be doing some in-person training, and we hope to announce some more information about Astracon coming up soon. Just last plug for that, and first and last plug, I guess, for upcoming events and activities. And so we should have a lot more details about that, and we definitely hope to offer some more information and the call for proposals. So if you're a FreePBX user or developer fan, we definitely appreciate FreePBX talks and participation as one of our tightly integrated GUI front ends for Asterisk. So thanks a lot, everyone. Again, really appreciate your time today. If there's nothing else, I think I
did want to add one more thing. We had one late
please.
question that ties into what you were saying. Sean asks, is there a FreePBX certification?
Oh,
and
yes.
That will be. You want to grab that?
Go ahead. Go ahead, Mike. Yeah, please. Yeah.
So as part of this upcoming in-person training, we will be offering FreePBX certification. This is for both our end user and partner group. We look forward to, helping to continue to foster, a community of certified individuals who can, work with us to, broaden the horizons for FreePBX. So yes, certification is coming up here in October.
Yeah, it's going to be somewhere warm, so Sizzling FreePBX 17 will continue. All right, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.